Shall we get started?
Sounds good.
I'm good with that. Of course, we didn't send out like any official agenda because lots going on, just not quite organized enough at this point. But we have our talking points. So, sort of the agenda for today is obviously discuss the survey and kind of finalize that, um, and then discuss distribution plans for that, and we can kind of go through those details, logistics. Um, uh, And then kind of Brian from CSTE should be joining us. Not sure if he'll be in a position to present, but we can actually have a discussion presentation of some sort around. Um, he was going to bring some information about the application process for private provider programs, AppSep application process. We're all kind of on the same page on that. Um, so those are the main things that I have on my list right now. And we just lost. Oh my gosh, who did we just lose?
I think Ray went off because
Ray just dropped off.
Ray is my proxy.
Oh, he
So
was standing in for you. Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. Perfect. It's like Kate's got it. I'm out. Right. Sort of thing. Right.
Good trade.
That works. That works.
I don't know. Sometimes Ray's a pretty smart guy.
Please tell him I said that, by the way.
I'm sure he's still listening. Don't worry, John.
um.
So
Go ahead,
yes,
Mary.
good morning to anyone who's joining. I think just to make sure things don't get lost in the discussion or shuffle, I know in the previous meetings we had discussed the distribution list for the survey to be heading out. Hopefully, the goal is still going to be the beginning of July, giving all of our districts a little bit of a small breather before asking them for information. And that we would be hopefully able to receive some sort of a master list, a full list from SDE. But I think it would be really helpful just to ensure that we get as broad of a picture back that if you were able to share with us your distribution list, the people that you would want to make sure that this gets to through your individual organizations, um, and focus is, so we want to make sure we get everyone's feedback and input on this, and we don't want to leave someone off inadvertently. We can go through, double check, take out the duplicates, but if that's something that you can do within the next a couple of weeks, I think that would be really helpful um, before we send everything out.
Yeah, agreed.
Sean,
Agreed. That's good.
would your list include non-approved schools?
No. Yeah, no. We talked about that last time. We'd have to come up with a way to get at the non-approves.
Yeah, well, we can get that for you.
Your name was next to that one actually, John, in my notes. That you might be able to pull together a list of the non-approved. So if
Yeah.
I can, maybe, and to your point, Mary, maybe we'll put a date on this, kind of a date certain. Our goal is to get the list out or to hit send on the survey, so to speak, on July 6th. Like wait through that holiday weekend, and then on July 6th send it out. Gives us everyone's kind of through the end of the year. That's what we discussed last time. Um, Gives them 3 or 4 weeks to get it to us by the beginning of August was our goal. Try to get responses by August 1st. Um, the So if that's the case, looking at my calendar, um, putting a certainly by the 26th, I'll say June 26th, we should have our lists assembled. If that's fair, to your point, Mary, a couple of weeks to get our list assembled. So the non-approved, I'm going to put John's name next to that one again, if that's okay, John. If you are able to pull together a list with, ideally, the list would be, name, maybe name, role, and email contact, right? So we can kind of, and then Mary can talk about, how we're going to actually make it happen once she's got the lists.
Well, to that point, I think it would be, I would like to back up that date for getting the list from each individual organization or from each representative here to maybe the 22nd, the 23rd of June. I'm just thinking because we are going to be sending this out from a CGA email. I'm not sure what kind are we're going into a vacation week. It's the one quiet period time I think of the year for some of the staff members, and I'd like to make sure we
Okay,
have a little bit of a buffer so that we
that's
aren't
fair. Yeah,
um saying, "Hey, you have one day."
yeah, that's fair. Kate.
All right, so I'm apologizing because I'm playing a little bit of catch up, but I
Yeah.
want to be able to get you what you need from my people.
Okay.
So, who is your specific, like, the ideal target on your survey?
Yeah, so I think so we have two surveys. One that's going to private providers in that kind of group,
Yeah.
right? So again, approved privates, the AppSeps, which I'm pretty sure we can get from uh
Yeah, the SDE.
Sean slash Brian, right? Um so one of you can raise your hand a little more vigorously and tell me which one it makes more sense to have that list.
Definitely makes sense to have it come from CSDE because
Okay.
not all approved privates are a member of my organization.
Right, that's what we talked
And
about
that's
last time. You're right. Yeah.
yeah, in our EdSite district contact list, it's up to date as of today. So we can pull it anytime, any place. It's right on our website.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we'll put that on your list, Brian slash CSTE. And I think maybe the receiver of this will be Mary for now. Is that fair? Right. The receiver of those lists, so you can send it to Mary. Um,
If you could also CC or just to address it to Mia as well, just
yeah.
to make
Okay.
sure it doesn't,
Get lost in the shuffle.
yeah.
Will
Yeah.
do.
And you could send it to both
Rep
of us.
Welander, when? Oh, sorry, Tom.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, yeah, send it to Rep Relander and I as co-chairs and Mia as staff, just to make sure. And we're looking to get that by June 22nd is our goal. So that gives you next
Just
week
let
sort of.
me know which date you want it, because like I said, it's updated on a daily basis. So if we can
I
send
would.
it whatever day you want.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we get it by the 22nd, any day next week, is fine. If
I was
there's
just thinking if there's any like changeover in leadership over the summer, like if you preferred to have it closer
oh,
to
I
when
see.
you send it out, or
Oh,
Sean,
I
I'm
see.
not sure if there's like any new I know one for sure that's retiring. Um, yeah, so we can send it out as close to the
I
survey as
gotcha.
to get the accurate.
You were cutting out a little bit. I don't know if that was just on my end or
No, it's on my
okay.
end too.
All
Yeah.
right. Not exactly sure. I heard something about a retirement. Yeah, we definitely have one that's retiring. I don't know anybody else at this time.
Yeah. So if we do know those retirees, then and we have a new contact, if possible. I mean, I would imagine someone's sort of tapped. I'm guessing, and you could put that name in there. That'd be great. But yeah, Brian. So the end of next week would be fine. I think if it's to put it on your calendar, the end
Well,
of
I
next week would be
guess
good.
that leads me to a question. In general, how much turnover do we see in general? And also, is that turnover going to start July 1st officially? And if that is the case, should we wait? Is that Brian, Sean, anybody who wants to?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm in a parking garage, so I apologize if my audio cuts out. But yeah, when we don't have to gather the list, it's collected on a nightly basis, like a daily basis. So I would say whenever we're ready to send the list, like that's when we pull it.
Okay. Do you anticipate there being a decent amount of change between the end of June and beginning of July?
If we pull it too early, there may be turnover over the next several. Not a huge amount, but like I was saying, I know one for sure, and there may be others that we're just not aware of.
And that's just again, that's just in the AppSeps piece of things. Of course, we're talking about
Correct.
LEAs and that part, which
Yeah.
there's that same things happen with sped directors as well, right? Potentially. So it's a
Same thing
good point.
applies. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we thought about this saying, okay, after July 6th, perfect after the holidays, but we didn't think about this little, wrinkle. So it's a good point to bring up. Kate, what's your thoughts on that from your perspective?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is probably the best tactic. I mean, it's not as though there's a special list beyond that. I mean, if they're the approved providers, the SDE is going to be the best source of that.
Right.
I don't know that I'm going to have any great insight beyond that. John, I guess,
Okay.
is the ones who are not approved. I have the best connection to the public providers, not the private providers. So,
Right. And on the public side, who's the list that you'll have are sped directors, superintendents? What's the best? I think we talked about sped directors being the,
yeah, I'm going to guess, to be fair, probably Brian is still going to be the best source because all that has to be reported to the SDE and cataloged with, so they know who to go after for data. So, we have that, but it's probably going to be most accurate with Brian because that's who has to do the reporting.
is that sounding too, Brian, as we put everything on your list?
Yeah, it's such a low lift for us because
Okay.
it's literally just pulling it right from the live site. So
Okay,
whenever
good.
you need it, we'll send it. And that's why I would just recommend, like if we're sending out the survey on July 6th, we can pull it on July 5th or whatever, just that way it gives the
Literally that
districts
close.
or
Okay.
the AppSep the time to post their new, in worst case scenario, if it's sent out and kicked back, we can get, that particular school, we can do like targeted outreach once we get them. The mass, distribution is really the most important for that initial send.
Right. So, Mary, to that point, do we want to push that off then, like the whole plan a little bit and push it off a week and say send it out the 13th of July, or are we getting too late? Or maybe that is a good balance to just throwing out ideas.
You know what? I'm gonna ask Mia if she can weigh in since
Okay.
this is what,
The logistics, yeah.
yeah, looking at the logistical process of getting something out, is that something that you would need or Lauren, my aide, or Jazz, anyone who would need more time? What's the best for you since we're asking you to do this?
I think it should be, I'll talk to Jazz about it, especially since there's not a whole lot going on here outside of that. I don't think it should be too much of an issue, but because we're creating like an individual email for this from CGA to send this out, right?
Yes, that has been created and we have access to that.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll talk to Jazz about it, but I don't think that should be an issue.
Okay. So seems like then the best option to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information would to be pull the list after July 1st. And I would imagine that any other organization represented here that had any changes, you would be aware of it if, you sent us your list by, the end of June and something changes on July 3rd, you would know about it and could give us a heads up. Is that accurate, probably?
Okay.
Is that
Brian's giving us
John?
thumbs up.
Yeah, okay.
John's giving us a funny face. What's that all about?
That's my normal face. But the one thought I had was, as part of this process, we should probably reach out to Amy at Concase just to get them to promote this thing, because they're not on this subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another piece of it, right? Because Brian, we talked about that last time as well. So it's getting the lists together, right? So right now we got directors of special ed, Brian K, directors, contacts of private providers, Brian K, non-approved folks, John Flanders. We talked about the risks as well. Is another one, so we'll have to figure out that list or what the best place to get that list is. But then, so it's they can list together. But then, to your point, John, the second piece is promoting it and saying, "Hey, you got the survey, fill it out." Right? And Brian had suggested he can do that through his whatever you called it, your monthly newsletter or something that goes out.
Yeah, we have a newsletter, a weekly email to the directors, and John, I meet with Amy every Thursday, so I can I can spread I can give her the heads up, and
Yeah.
they do a great job of kind of prepping people to say, please don't ignore this important survey.
There's so much going on. I feel like everyone, even in a quiet
Yeah.
period of time, that it's any type of additional nudges is always appreciated. At least
Yeah, it's a
from my
good
end.
point, John.
Um,
Oh, so and by the way, I did check with the other co-chairs of the other Bergen subcommittees. Two of them got back to me that they're not doing surveys. I didn't hear from the third one, but it didn't sound like anyone else, because we just wanted to confirm that we weren't like multiple groups of us sending the similar things out to similar groups. So it doesn't appear that's going to be a concern. So just by the way. All right, so more stuff on Brian's plate. So the what other list? So the rest list, is that something, Brian? Again, sorry to point to Brian.
We got it. Yeah,
You
we
got it.
have all
Okay.
that. Yeah, it's the same
Okay.
list, no problem. And
Same idea.
yeah,
Okay.
and like I said,
So
not a heavy lift at all. So it's
right.
not a problem. Yep.
And keeping those separate, because like certainly like we have these two surveys, right, Sean? So we have the survey that's directed at sort of the outside providers, I call, right, private providers, risks included, and then there's the LEA kind of survey, right, like why are you outplacing sort of comment questions in that vein. So just keeping those two groups separate. So as Mia gets, a bunch of spreadsheets, there's going to be these spreadsheets for this survey and this spreadsheets for this survey, sort of things. We just got to be clear on which ones they are. Were there other groups other than what we just shared that we wanted to be sure to include?
It would be nice to have parents have a voice in this.
mhm.
Yeah, we talked about that. Interesting. We did talk about that last time, John, as far as like their reasons for wanting outplacement sort of thing, right? Of course, that's might be a different survey. I'm not sure if the surveys we
No,
have.
this survey is
Right.
not
Right. So that's like a
remotely
different,
appropriate
right.
for that.
Right. So a different survey, sort of thing. All right. Yeah.
I don't know if that I don't disagree that it's important to have family and parental feedback. Is that written in our charge though, or is that's what I would be wondering? And Brian, I'm
Yeah.
by your hand.
Yeah. I mean, I can share screen on the charge again. I mean, it's this charge that we're working out right now, right? A needs-based study to determine if additional special ed programs and services are required to meet student demand. Conduct a needs-based study, review approved and non-approved programs, whether they maintain a wait list, develop, recommend new methodology. Yeah, so yes, to your point, Mary, it doesn't explicitly say that. And I know with these types of work groups, John, because trust me, I'm a parent, so I just want the parent input on everything that it matters on. We've got to be careful about scope creep, right? And just kind of trying to do this much, and we're supposed to be focused on this part. So I guess we'd have to talk about what would be the purpose. What would we want to learn from parents in terms of that we would learn from some sampling of them. They're harder to connect with, obviously, so reaching them and getting them to fill out a survey would be more challenging. But what would be the purpose of that, I guess? Yeah, that we're not going to learn from
How
the
many
groups we just talked about.
How many people are finding out that they can't get an appropriate level of service for their child because the resources don't exist or their LEA finds that it's excessive in cost and denies it for that reason? I mean, if you consider it's fair to say that of all of the due process hearing requests that the state sees, maybe one or two are not for that purpose. And so,
But is that data we can get that way? I mean, if just trying to figure out sort of the quantitative response, like are we able to? I'm just trying to think, we're going to probably need to survey people more as time goes on. So I don't want to survey fatigue families in particular.
And I don't want to make the process any worse. I'm simply saying that if we present a report that doesn't have direct input from the consumer of the service, we will put out a bad report. And so
Yeah,
I think that
yeah,
I think that we're tracking this from the point where the PPT has decided that an outplacement is appropriate versus getting too far ahead of that, because then we'll be getting data from parents who are still working with the district to come up with appropriate programming, and that's not going to necessarily answer the question of whether or not there are enough. Are they in the right spots? Are they serving the right populations? I think it's more objective if we keep it with the directors who will be reporting upon, what's been agreed upon by the PPT. Unless I'm missing
yeah,
some part of the scope.
yeah. No, I sort of agree with you. And John, I mean, I sort of disagree that it would be a bad report if we don't have parent input. I mean, I think a lot of the things lend themselves to really needing the parent input, and I'm not sure this one is. I mean, whatever we got from data from parents, just thinking this through, and others can chime in. Um, is it going to be a representative enough sample, right? Like it's going to be a pretty small sample, I would imagine, that we get, even though we try hard and put out the survey. And then if we get some data, who we going to get is likely not the parent that's like, oh yeah, everything's awesome, man. My kid's getting everything they need in district, you know, like that parent's not responding to the survey, right? And the one that like, oh yeah, I asked for outplacement and everything went smooth and I got it. You're going to get those. So I guess they could be like anecdotal examples that we could use them as. I mean, that's a thought I'm just throwing out there, but to get like actual data, and maybe there's a different use for that information that you're getting, John. And trust me, again, as a parent who's been through this process over the years, I completely understand that we need the voice in the room very often, and most often should have it. I just not sure how it fits in here. That's all. Be curious to hear from others.
I'm concerned that PPT decision as to whether or not the outplacement is appropriate often is no, it's not appropriate, and it's not appropriate because A, we don't have a resource to do it, or B, we think it's too expensive, and that not reflecting that and determining what the needs are is going to skew the data that you get. I understand the difficulty of collecting it, and I'm not sure that a survey is the way to get that information into the thing. I'm simply saying that the report simply has to reflect the needs of the consumer of this. And if that voice isn't included in the report, it will be a bad report.
Well, I think I'm trying to find the charge exactly so I can just read the language because I think
I have
what
it here. I'll share
Sean,
screen.
okay, I think
I can
Sean's point is key in that we're trying to get information based off of a different point in time than for this particular charge. That's not meaning we can't discuss a family's input afterwards, or if that's a later charge for a follow-up on the Bergen. But right now, I don't think that that's part of what we've been discussing for the last few months in terms of the information we're trying to gather.
I see it. Okay.
Okay, yeah, now I can see it.
And welcome, Senator McCrory. Thanks for joining us.
So will there be an opportunity for a minority report? Or a minority statement?
Are you objecting to the concept
I'm objecting to producing a report that doesn't include input from in some format, input from families. Yes, I am, very much so.
We haven't discussed the minority statement or anything, but we can certainly address that at some point. I mean, I think we're still in the conversation phase and discussion phase, John. So just to kind of
And I
talk this
understand,
through,
and I
yeah,
believe that it's important
yeah,
information that's being
yeah.
collected.
So
From
what's
my
another
perspective,
way?
it's not
Yeah,
enough information.
yeah, and I think about in similar or other reports that you can get some anecdotal stories of from families. Like I don't know what you would get. Um, and again, you said other forms of ways to get this information. Again, this is a group of volunteers on a volunteer commission that's meeting once a month or so with some staff support. So I'm not sure. It's not like we're in a position to like do focus groups and really do, heavy duty work on it, So I'm just talking it through, right? Like, so what's the other ways that we can gather that perspective if we determine it's important? I know, sorry, Mary, I'm talking over while you're trying to read this
It's okay.
statement, this thing, but um, yeah, I mean, yeah, Brian, look at raising his hand, being all official.
Sorry, I'm off camera, so I'm trying to, yeah, I don't want to interrupt.
Doug, go
Um,
ahead.
just a couple thoughts or suggestions. Um, I think to Sean's point, and John, we know placement is contentious and can potentially be contentious, but not all placements are. But there are definitely examples. But if for the currently placed students in private special education programs, are we to assume that those placements are appropriate for the student for the purposes of that they have been placed? That doesn't mean that students that are placed in programs are seeking or looking for alternative programming that's closer to home, or that is, maybe the student is not doing well in the current setting. Like all those things are reality. And those parents will have different perspective based on their own child's individual unique situation. There are many circumstances where PPTs have recommended outplacement, but they can't get in anywhere. Those are the parents and families that we should be hearing from, that the PPT has decided, you know what, the district can no longer meet their needs and there is no room. I mean, that's the point of the waiting list and all these other things. And I think that would lend itself to the report if we could say, how many students are currently interim, receiving some type of alternative programming because they don't have a placement that can meet their needs currently. So that's just another approach to tapping into those particular subset of families. And, perhaps CSDE could like pull, one of the suggestions was, what data do we currently have to be able to include in the report? So I'm not sure, given reading this charge, that it's like we don't need to look and see what parent satisfaction is or if they're in agreement or not. Like I think it's basically, is there programming to meet the needs of students, and how do we find that out? To me, it's if kids are not placed, if the recommendation has been made but they're not placed. Just a suggestion to look at it from a little different perspective.
I think that makes sense, Brian. And Sean, your surveys were incredibly thorough, but I'm 99% sure, if not 100% sure, that there were multiple questions in each version about wait lists and challenges with placements. So that information would be captured. Um, it's just that this particular charge for what we're trying to get information for is not coming from parents' perspective.
And I think that we can infer that if students are experiencing wait lists, that's going to be a dissatisfier. We can indicate that this is a dissatisfier for students and families who have agreed on a certain type of programming that they can't yet access. So I think that they're somewhat included.
And, the other piece, Brian, is your hand raised again, or is it still raised? Okay, there we go.
No, sorry.
Just making sure. And thinking about the first sentence of this, right? Need-based study, determine if special ed program services are required in the state. So the first sentence doesn't reference the approved and outplacement situation, right? And then it goes on to specify, the outplacement providers. But I mean, because the other piece, and I think we talked about this in the survey, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the LEA side is, are you able to provide the services in district? I mean, I think that's often the goal of the schools and the districts, right? Is can we provide? And that's sort of a piece of this really anyway. A needs-based study, do we have the services both in district and out of districts? It's not just about, do we have enough seats and are there wait lists? That's like one piece of it, right? And people get denied because there's no seats. But the other piece of it is, because many schools have built the programs and built the services and provided the services in district. And the fact that they're even being, I mean, the information that we're going to gather saying there's this many requests for outplacement, again, shines a light into some information pointing to the fact that those services aren't available in district for many of them that could be provided in district. So I think there's information in there from that. But again, John, I'm not trying to, shy away from your point here. Anyway, I don't know, other thoughts?
To that point, I think it would be a good idea if there are any potential edits to the survey that should be submitted as soon as possible. We can make that. I don't know if anyone had any thoughts that there wasn't a perspective other than that had been not included.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone, well, yeah, if you haven't already, and I think, Sean, you've gotten feedback, I know, from a number of people, including Brian. If you haven't had a chance, yeah, we kind of now is the hour, like get it by the end of this week, I'll say, any additional feedback to the surveys. And if that includes, John, to your point, some questions that, even though it doesn't directly get from the parents, right, but some questions that might get to the information that we agree. I mean, to a certain extent, it's important to have that.
No, I
Can we
think the
capture
survey
it?
is fine for collecting the information.
Okay.
I have reviewed the survey and
I know,
I think it is fine for doing what it's intended to do. My concern is that it is there is one set of perspective and the consumer perspective is not there's no effective way to get that in unfiltered. How's that?
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm not in any way suggesting that the survey is not an appropriate vehicle and that it will not produce useful information. I'm simply saying that it will not produce all of the information that the decision makers need in order to make an effective decision.
Understood. And I think duly noted. And we can figure out how to adjust that moving forward, I guess. I don't think we're going to solve that certainly today, but
oh no,
it's an important point too. And I hear you. Just to circle back to kind of the logistics of it. So again, I'll say sort of for the final shot you have at the survey, maybe is this Friday, right? So if any sort of last minute comments, if you haven't had a chance, get those into Sean by this Friday. And I think we're probably good on that front. We'll use the Bergen, whatever it is at CGA, the CGA Bergen email to distribute. Brian, if you could get us the list, how do you want this list done, Brian? We've talked to you about these groups, SPED directors, private program contacts, RESCs. Is us telling you now and telling you get us on July 2nd, is that good enough? Or do you need a reminder or an email, or how do you want to? make sure that that happens if you're still listening.
All set. We're all set on our end.
Okay.
We can send it July 2, yeah, to
Is that
Mia, Webb Wheelander, and yourself, and then
okay?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So I'll say July 2nd. That way, there it's right before the long weekend. You get it knocked out, and then on Monday, Mia, if and again, if it takes a little bit of time to, a day or two to get that from spreadsheet. I always laugh because I'm not the technology IT guy. So for me to take a spreadsheet and a bunch of people and get it to an email to people would take me like a week and a half. But, but you guys will be much quicker at it than I would. And then, and John, to the extent you can get that non-approved list at some point, and by July 2nd, and if you get it sooner, then great. I mean, I don't know if that one would necessarily be as up to date and dated and turnover like Brian's talking about, right? Because it's not entered into some system that's going to automatically update. So if you're able to get that to them sooner, then certainly Mia can play around and kind of use that as a sampling to get the survey. Now, were there other groups? I just want to make sure there's no other groups that we're missing. These were my notes from previously. These groups, were there any other groups that we wanted to get these things to? So we're talking the private providers, not approved, approved. We're talking the RESCs. I think that covers most of the outplacements, right? And then the LEAs and the SPED directors. Are there other, with the LEAs, Brian, now thinking about that and the SPED directors, would that list, or we want to make sure that list includes all the range of school districts, including like, Unified One and the tech schools, and
100%. Yeah, they're all
all
in there.
those. Right.
The
Okay.
endowed academies are in there. The
Endowed academies.
USD one, yeah,
Okay.
170.
Okay.
There'll be 170 on that list.
Okay.
It includes all those programs
All
you're
right. Cool.
mentioning. Yeah.
Cool. Just kind of making sure. I'm just thinking through the pockets that we might be missing, right? All right. Any other comments about that? I think we're close on that. We got the surveys, we got the distribution. So then thinking about promotion, would certainly be as Brian can do through Concase and talking with Amy and through his newsletter and through each of your channels for those of you who have contacts and connections with these groups. Certainly once we have the survey, and actually thinking about that now, the survey, Sean, and hopefully you can work with Mia on this, but like you created the survey and I believe it was like a new Google account that you created or something, just to do it. I don't know how that will work with us collecting the data piece. And I don't know if everyone needs to be part of this conversation, but just thinking that through, like a CGA email, distributing this, you know what I mean? Or does it need to be converted into some other format or something? I don't know.
That was one of my logistical questions as well.
Yeah. Okay. Mia, any thoughts on that? Like as far as just this Google survey that we've created that,
Yeah, I think we could, because I think through Google surveys, it does, you can have it like make like a spreadsheet based on the answers. But again, I'll talk to Jazz about this to see if there's if there's anything similar that's been done like this before, and like if there's ever been any protocol for that.
Okay. Yeah, because right now the responses would come through to this Google account that Sean's created, right? That's where they'll be housed. So we'll need to make sure you guys have access to that, or do it so that they somehow come to the CGA email. You know what I mean? So I guess I'll trust that you in and this as needed to connect with Sean to make it all happen. You've seen the survey, I think, and so you can well, anyway, I'll leave that in your hands. And if there's something that others of us need to chime in on, certainly let us know. I just don't want there to be a hiccup last minute, like, oh no, the link doesn't work because it's, connected with the CGA thing or something.
Right. I'll follow up with you, Mia. And
Yeah.
we can talk about that. And
Okay.
I think Sean, I was supposed to follow up with you about that before this meeting. But to be honest with you, I think the meeting that we had that was like 3 days after session ended or something, it was I might not have been firing on all cylinders. So.
Everyone was a little sideways for that meeting in May. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So the other thing to back to leaning into Brian again. So thank goodness you joined, Brian. We talked about there's certain data that you have now. Again, outside of the survey, stepping away from the survey for a minute, on from providers, from RESCs such as waitlist data, numbers. So certainly that information, enrollment, all that stuff, current enrollment. How do you want us to create a data request list for you? I had that kind of note from last time and get that to you, or is there something that in this you can say here, this is what I know you guys will need for information on that?
So Tom, we don't have wait lists, so we wouldn't know how many students are on the wait list without the survey or without asking the RESCs.
Okay.
But we can send like we have everything else you mentioned. We have number of students. Is that what you're looking for? The number of students in each placement?
I guess I'm just thinking what information, and anyone chime in, please. Like what information is helpful to us as we're trying to see, we're doing this needs-based study, right? Like what are the needs, right? And so I think part of it is how many seats are out there, right? And how many slots are available. So yeah, whatever data you have that speaks to that, right? That can speak to,
Yeah, for our APSIPs, for example, they're approved for a certain number of slots.
Right.
So we can get that information to you. RESCs would be similarly, situated, although we don't approve the RESC programs. We collect the same data. So yeah, just let us know exactly what you're looking for. But in the meantime, we can provide you the number of programs, the names of the programs, locations of the programs, number of students currently enrolled, in max capacity based on current staffing.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that, or what other? Trying to just step outside of the survey and other things that we can do to get what we need on this, this project. Nothing. My wait time. I'm practicing extra long wait time these days because I talk too much. So I'm practicing extra long wait time.
I for some reason can't find the raise my hand button.
There
I've
you
been
go. You
using
just
Zoom
did.
since 2020, so I'm
you
just
just
blurting
did.
out.
Go ahead,
I
Sarah.
agree with what Brian just said, but Brian, you said something that was interesting. You said max capacity based on current staffing. Is that an important nuance we want to try to capture? Because I'm interested, that makes me think that if they're not staffed to full capacity, they can't bring in as many students. And so I'd be interested in hearing what is their absolute max capacity when staffed appropriately? And then what is it currently sitting at?
Right.
Because
Both pieces.
because if that lifts up an issue of staffing, then I think that creates a different conversation.
I mean, so when I said max capacity, when our approved private special ed programs are approved, they're approved for a certain number of students based on their building, based on their location, and based on their capacity. And then those directors ensure that they're meeting the needs of the students. That doesn't mean that they are at their max capacity, at the time of approval or at any one point in time, but we approve based on that formula. So, we know there's staffing crisis in the state, especially in special education related services. So that's a factor. Like, if tomorrow you said to Sean, we're going to give you 50 we're going to give you all this money to take in, 50 new students, he wouldn't have the staffing to do that. We would have to, build that out, or he would have to build that out within the context of the organization. So that was my comment, meaning that they're approved based on, building size, number of classrooms, intensity of needs of students, that type of thing. Yeah.
Do you think, Brian, there might be instances, or Sean even, would there be instances of programs that are not at their max capacity because of issues around staffing?
Certainly.
John, I'll let you speak to that.
100%.
Okay,
Look, I'm personally experiencing that in
yeah.
my sites. So can
So I think
confirm.
that's an important part of the supply demand issue.
Staffing challenges are indicated in the survey too. So
Okay,
we'll be able to
yep,
get to
right,
that.
right, okay.
And Sarah, that's a good point that you brought up because and that's not, as somebody who's actually experiencing the transition side of this right now, and which just happened to my son, that is absolutely something that needs to be captured because when an agency tells you they have a spot, 4 months later they tell you they don't have a spot because of staffing, right? At the very last minute, 2 weeks from graduating, huge problem. Huge problem. So if it's happening on that side of the transition, it has to be captured on the other, right? Because our families are not, they're waiting and waiting in limbo, right? And trying to figure out how to access what their child is entitled to. So thank you for bringing that up.
My other concern or thought on all of this is, again, the capacity within the districts. And I know I've brought it up a couple times, and I don't know how to capture that as easily. But I think, to me, that's a huge part of this, right? Is, do the districts have the capacity, both in specialized programming and specialized services, and they don't always, which is why they're outplacing, right? So John's shaking his head, but like we know that, but that's going to be a really important piece in this report to kind of talk about. So to the extent we can get information and data on that, I don't know. The survey is one way that we're doing it, so that's one way. Is there another way, like we're looking at private providers? There's this much capacity, and they're full or they're not full or whatever. Like, to me, from where I sit as a disability advocate, the solution is not create more slots, and double the number of slots and just keep filling them. It's looking at, and it's why the seed grant got passed. Part of the reason the seed grant got passed this past year was to help build that in district capacity. So I think, is there a way to get at that? And it's more challenging, obviously, because they don't have. I mean, some of those specialized programs are certainly on the transition side. Liz, to your point, like some of those are registered, for lack of a better word, with the state, and they're recognized, and there's a slot capacity with those. But for some of the other programs that are in district, and I live in Rocky Hill and I'm on my Board of Education in Rocky Hill, so I'm aware of some of the programs in that district. Just thinking about that as an example, there's different programs that we have developed in district that are specialized that can help service some of those students to try to reduce the number of outplacements. So anyway, it's sort of just a meandering question, but like I think it's a huge part of this puzzle that I'd love to be able to get at with this, because I think, Kate, go ahead.
So, Tom, I do think that you're hitting on a really important issue. And I think it may come from either asking superintendents or special ed directors, depending on districts, because various districts, depending on the size of them, has to respond to that question differently, right? If you're a small district that relies more heavily on the RESCs for your special education services, that your positioning is different, right? But I do think one of the things that we capture through vacancy data is the fact that even if a district wanted to offer programs, do they have the staff to offer those programs? And I do think that one of the challenges and real barriers to even the seed grant being utilized the way we want is staffing. We are actively driving people out of the special ed profession so that, you have a lot of will, and so an interest in a lot of districts to provide opportunities to keep their students close to their communities. There's a lot of actual interest in doing that, right? It's easier for families. It allows people to, have a variety of interactions and services. But at the end of the day, that really gets driven by two factors, right? It's staff and facilities. Right? Do I physically have the space to provide students with the opportunities they need? And do I have the staff to execute that program? And in the end, superintendents are the people who will have to answer that question, right? based on sort of what their experience is in their district. And some of that is
Yeah.
data that may be gleaned already, like how many special education students you have with which levels of intervention assigned to them. That is data that should be readily available. But I think, again, talking about unmet need, um, the question remains of if you could expand your special education services, like let's take money off the table for a second, right? And go like, listen, money were no object. And you had the opportunity to expand your special ed services. Could you? Could you even do it? Are there staff available and space available to do that? Or is part of what is driving some of this conversation the reality that superintendents can't add anymore? That's some of the capacity question.
Sure.
We've been talking for my entire career, in my side, we've been trying to get a grasp on things like what's the right caseload, language, like what does it mean to have the right caseload so that the student and family is getting the attention they need and we aren't pulling people and stretching them so thin they can't do what they need to do, right? And we've never figured that out. And some of it's because as soon as we try and put something that puts boundaries or definition around that, a district immediately goes, we can't live with that. Like we just can't. If we agree to this, then we can't do this. And so I do think there may be a space for asking, the people who ultimately have to make the resource allocation decisions, do you have what you need to feel like you are fulfilling the opportunity to support these children and families? So because I'm going to tell you that I would be shocked if anybody said yes to you. But I think there's a big difference between what I think and actual data and information that we pull. So there may be a place for asking, and again, somebody probably better at this than me might have a survey question about where districts feel they have not met the need or where they could do more, right? And so framing it in a way that I don't want to be blaming districts or giving them sort of the
Right.
space where they're like, we're not meeting our student needs, right?
Right.
Because
Of
that's
course.
a superintendent's going to freak out if we ask that
Right.
question.
Right. Right.
But I do think there's a way to ask the question about, what is the biggest challenges and barriers that you're trying to navigate in meeting your student needs? And what would be things that, where they could increase opportunity?
No, I'm going. Sean, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I just want to add to the list beyond facilities and the appropriately certified staff, specialized training. I think that that's a real significant barrier. I mean, I've been a special educator for 25 years now, and I personally don't have experience with certain populations, and I wouldn't be a good fit for certain in-district programming. So I think that just gets compounded.
Yeah, kind of a subset piece of the staffing point.
Mhm.
Um,
I
Yeah.
mean, I would imagine that as we do this initial survey, it's going to provide a wealth of information, and some specifics that maybe we don't have currently, that we're going to need to then follow up on. So we can start really drilling down to the root of what do we need to do for each of these concerns. But
Yeah, and is some of this are some of these things, Kate, thanks for bringing these things up, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, but are some of these things captured in some of our questions now with the SPED directors? Do we need, again, it doesn't have to be done right today, but is there to your point, Mary, a kind of a secondary, maybe a follow-up survey, maybe a different type of shorter survey, I don't know, very directed to superintendents about this resource issue, about kind of the ability to provide services in district thing a little more directly, or did we address it well enough in that second survey? I haven't looked at the survey in a minute, so because I had done it previously, but
I mean, Liz and Sarah, would you be able to just look back at the surveys and see if there's a spot that we are not getting some of the
Yeah,
information that might be helpful.
yeah, I'll look again. I was just looking at it as you were all talking about it. I mean, there is a whole section. There is a section on internal capacity and constraints. So I can think about it a little more, and Sean, get back to you with if I can think of any additional adds to that section. I was also wondering if after initial data collection from public schools, and I know we don't have all the time, and somebody mentioned focus groups earlier not being particularly realistic, but I do wonder if there's a more focused work that could be done depending on the responses to this piece about internal capacity,
Mhm.
and somehow tie it to the seed grant. There's got to be some overlap or correlation there, something we can glean from that.
Yeah,
And
no, it's a great point because some sort of follow up to maybe this first round of yeah.
And to the point where what Kate just said about a superintendent is not going to want to, especially in a written survey, say we are not meeting capacity. But in that same vein, going back to what John had mentioned, is there a way that is there a way to frame a question of saying how many not parental complaints have you had, or is there a way to get, does your school or your program have an internal satisfaction survey, something that could get to a little bit more information about, as John said, the consumer side, without going into something that is outside of the what we're supposed to be looking at? Are they measuring an internal temperature within their families?
Yeah, I mean, for me to answer that question, it is a little tricky because I'm a RESC school district. So the magnet schools, we collaborate with the sending district. So it's the sending district who owns the IEP. So if there's going to be any complaints, it's going
Right.
back to the sending district, not necessarily to us, because any decisions about the IEP, like we can make a recommendation, but then that final decision really rests with the sending LEA. So,
Right.
yeah. So it's a
Mary,
little tricky for us.
And
yeah, I think Mary, it might be worth consulting with like Fran even and just saying, listen, we're trying to get at this without creating a problem, but we do need to identify what are the barriers that districts are feeling. Where is the system not working the way that they would like it to? Because I think that it's hard for them to say like XYZ, but there are objective barriers that they have. The fact of the matter is that we don't have a really particularly effective funding formula for this, right? Like that creates a problem in terms of building staffing and again, it's not about are you meeting your IEP requirements, right? That's not actually the question. The question is, are you able to execute the program the way that you would like to? Or are there ways that you feel you could improve your program? And what are the barriers to those things so that we can drill in and not just get sort of our anecdotal instinct, which is saying, we can see that there are vast paraprofessional vacancies. There are vast special education vacancies. We can count that the pipeline is not producing enough special education teachers. We can see all that and it feels a certain way, but I think from the viewpoint of the people building programs, are you able to build the program that you would really like to exceed your family's expectations, right? To do the way that you would really like to. And if you could, what would be additional resources that would be necessary or challenges you are facing in building that program? Because we don't want to put them in the position of like, yeah, we're struggling to meet our IEP requirements because nobody's going to write that down. That's
Right.
absolutely not something. So I think it has to be from the vein of um, you know, we know that there almost, I don't know a single district, honestly, and we run a real wide gambit from teeny tiny,
Mhm.
with 6 teachers in it to Stanford with 1,600, right? And I don't think there's a single district that is like, we're doing it exactly the way we want with everything that we need. Because, that's just it's a rough game right now with staffing and resources and facilities. And Sean, your point about training is dead on, right? Like, even if we have a person, are they prepared for the group that we have, and how are we managing that training aspect? So I think, somebody like Fran might be able to help us with the language of it that is the invitation to the leaders, as opposed to, having them feel like they're being attacked and I think you'll get more out of them if we frame it in the way that they're prepared to answer it, and it'll glean us what we need.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that distinction you made, Kate, that I've been in several conversations, my own district included, that if we had the proper resources and the staffing, we would be offering additional programming to keep our students with us. And I think that's a very common theme in many communities. So I do appreciate you bringing that up. And I do think Fran would be a great resource.
John?
I absolutely agree with you, Kate. Let me say first off that some of that parent satisfaction information is available. It's part of the reporting that Brian has to do to the feds every year. So we could get a copy of what's I'm drawing a blank on the name of the
I think it's called that parent
Indicator
satisfaction
8.
survey. Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So
indicator 8. I would just be careful with the term satisfaction because
yeah, I'm
Parent survey.
it's a parent survey, which gets at, are parents meaningfully included in the PPT process? But if it's helpful, we can share the survey. We have 26 or so questions, and Tom knows it's something that the State Advisory Council looks at on an annual basis or talks about annually as well.
Yeah.
But you're right, John. We can share those data.
And that's good.
Typically,
That's
about
good.
80% of parents
Yeah.
are indicate that they're meaningfully involved.
Right. And it's tough because, and John, not to dwell on it, because it's a good point. We have that data. Sometimes the larger surveys, everything looks rosy, right? Because you're like, yeah, the numbers are here. The average is whatever, 4 out of 5 or something. And then it doesn't get up to 20%, like, which is kind of the 20% of people that are not satisfied. Like, that's just sort of what we're looking to hear from in this case. But you know what I mean? So that doesn't always come out in a survey, and but anyway, go ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
I think the point is that Brian is absolutely correct. I mean, I've looked at that study. I've worked on that study over the past, and you will often get 80% of people are satisfied.
Right.
But of course, that means that in this group, three of us
Or not.
will be thinking that this is doing a lousy job, and the reason that we're thinking that is that it's important. That's where the need is, and that's where the identification of the need is, and that is where the documentation of the need is going to come from. And so we need to, and Kate, you're absolutely correct that no superintendent in the world is going to say we're doing a lousy job, but there are going to be a significant number of families in that school district who aren't going to agree with that superintendent. And I think that we can't, and that was my point earlier, is that we can't actively reflect what those needs are without, without asking somebody, are you screwing up, which nobody will say. And the only way to get it is to talk to the people who believe that they're not getting what they're needing.
Yeah, and I think we're getting somewhere on this, because I do see this as looking like it might be some sort of a follow-up. Like, and we can work on this as we move forward, and these other surveys are going out, and we're getting, responses and collecting that data at the same time, looking at some sort of a follow-up to through Fran to superintendents with these kind of targeted sort of questions, and including some input, to your point, John, from families somehow, when we can kind of talk through that, what that looks like. This sort of indirectly gets at the parent dissatisfaction, right? If it's like superintendents are saying we can't provide these services in the way that they're allowed to and able to, right, because of these barriers and these issues. Brian.
Tom and Rep. Wheelander, if it's helpful, we can share that survey with you to distribute to the group, just so folks can take a look at it, as well as our most recent data. And then John, I don't mean to pick on the terms you're using, but it is not satisfaction. So I think when we're talking, and I know, and you're making, I know you're making a larger point around families' perspective, which is really important. I also wanted to share, when we're talking about students, we're talking about roughly a little less than 6%, 5.8% that are in out of district placement programs, which is a small percentage, but very complex students. And even when things are going well and students are well resourced and programs are well resourced, that doesn't necessarily equate to ideal situations for students, given the challenges that they're facing, at one particular point in time. So we hear often from families saying, I love my team, but my student is not, achieving or getting better or things of that nature. So that it's very complex and nuanced, but I agree with all the points made, and we can share the parent survey. And we talked about with the State Advisory Council for Special Education, looking at that survey to see if it needs to be updated. This February is our last submission to the federal government on our 6-year state plan. So the timing is great to look at the survey and see if it needs to be adjusted, or beyond what the federal government's asking for, are there data points that are really important to us to be able to understand more broadly across the state? And just for reference, so about roughly a third of the district's parents receive that survey every year. We have 3 cohorts, A, B, and C, with roughly 60 LEAs in each cohort, a little bit less than that. But and not every parent receives it. Some of our larger districts, it's a representative sample. So just wanted to throw that piece out there, but we are also open to looking at that survey under a new lens within the current context in the state.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. And it's sort of it's a fairly narrow survey. It's and we'll see it when we get a copy of it. Is there anyone, so I guess just thinking about this most recent part of our conversation around a follow-up sort of secondary look at this, Brian's got a bunch of asks from us today, data requests and stuff. Fortunately, it's good to hear they're not all super hard to do. Sean, I know, has a lot on his plate helping out with the surveys and stuff. I appreciate that. We're going to connect with that and kind of make them happen, so to speak. Anyone want to take a shot at putting some thoughts together on the follow-up pieces to this? Looking at the current survey, what a follow-up might be to some superintendents to get some of this kind of, I don't know, these in-district programming services sort of questions. We're going to have barriers and stuff like that. Does anyone have the space to peek at that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to follow up with Fran. And then yes, I can do that. And if we can all maybe just take a minute and look at what the questions are asking, and if there's like a sub question that we can tuck in, to get at the more specifics, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay. All right, cool. I know Sarah and Kate were talking, we've looked at it already, and are kind of looking another clean look at it, and just comments back to Sean, hopefully, if that works. And just again, trying to keep this thing moving by Friday if we can. I know everyone's got super packed schedules, and then we'll still try to stick with the lists to Mary by the 2nd, and then get the survey actually hit send early in the week of 7/6, or as soon as we can get it together logistically. The next thing, I mean, I have nothing else on my agenda, although it wasn't really an agenda because I didn't share any agenda with you guys because I wasn't on the ball enough to do that. So my apologies in advance. I'll try to be better next time, but too many committees and too many things and work groups, and I can't keep track of them all.
We talked about it. We were good.
Yeah, we talked about it. Mary and I, we had a little meeting, and here's the plan, and kind of following up from our last meeting. So, what I just do want to close on, certainly though, is summer is upon us. And everyone's schedules get crazy. I really appreciate, the 10 or 12 of us that are here, being here. So I appreciate that. Just looking at future dates, I don't think we've set them yet, but I'd like to set them now. Part of this is working around Rep. Lander and my schedules to make sure that one or both of us are available, just with summer vacations coming up. And just, I know we have others. Brian, do you want to chime in before I get to that?
Just real quick, Tom, I had invited Ashley DeGanchi from our team here today, who oversees our, that's
sorry.
okay. No, that's okay. She oversees our AppSep approval process along with Dory Papa. So in a future meeting, I don't know if there was interest in folks having us do like a quick presentation on what the application process looks like. We have some documentation on it, like a one-pager, and obviously we have our state standards, but appreciate, we're ready and willing and able to kind of provide that information whenever is appropriate.
Thank you, Brian. Apologies, Ashley. You're like patiently walking along and getting your exercise, thankfully, while we're talking.
It's totally okay. This conversation is really insightful. I appreciate you allowing me to be here.
Yeah. So, and I know Brian, we did ask, that was on the list, and Brian came through and brought Ashley in already, and then I don't know if we want to kind of squeeze it in now, or we can try to do it at our next meeting.
How long is the presentation?
Yeah, what would you need for?
It's really just a brief overview. I mean, I can screen share the actual application. It's about 40 pages long, and then just by section, I've included the materials that the programs are expected to submit. But it's totally
I mean, we want to try to do a quick overview right now, just since we're all here.
Sure.
Is that okay? Okay. Thank you, Brian,
Ashley,
for that. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, before you share, I just had a document that I wanted to show real quick. Are we able to share, Tom and Mia?
You are right now, yeah.
Oh shoot.
You are sharing, so we're seeing your notes right now.
Okay.
Be careful when you hit share.
Yeah, my apologies.
It's okay. We don't want to see your inbox.
So that's a data request.
It's anything like my computer. You have like 17 windows open.
Yeah, trying to get open the right doc.
Yeah. So while Brian's doing that,
Ashley, you go ahead and I'll follow up, because really what I wanted to share is the one pager that I can send to you all, which essentially shows the CSDE responsibilities related to AppSep approvals. It highlights, kind of bullets out the standards that instead of like a large document, it just mentions the standards in a bulleted format. And then it highlights the 2-day process that we have with the approved private special education programs, and then some of our follow-up activities. So what Ashley's going to go through now is just to show you the application. So thanks, Ashley.
Yep, for sure. So I am Ashley, and I assist Dr. Dory Papa with AppSep approvals. She is the coordinator. I am very much her student learning this process. Just to give you an idea, first and foremost, I thought I would share this is your average application binder that the program submits. Takes a couple hours to go through. This application is not publicly available. We like to share it with programs who have had bid operations for at least a year and have 10 students if they're initially trying to get approved. And then obviously for programs that are up for reapproval, they might already have access to the application, or Dory and I might send it to them. So you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Perfect. So this is the application. Like I said, it's about 40 pages long. You have your general instructions, and then it's broken down into sections. So I thought it would be important to kind of outline what specific attachments go with each section, because as you could tell by the size of the binder, it is a lot of information. So we look at whether a program operates one location or multiple locations. If they have multiple locations, they need to include their floor plans, identifying instructional therapeutic areas. If they have any off-site service descriptions, we look at their fire inspection, their health inspection. We also look at the capacity, like we guys were talking about before, the building occupancy, the ages and grades served, if there's administrative coverage for absences, and we look at community sites that the program might visit. We'll also review documentation of approval from other agencies if it's applicable. So, for example, if there's a license for a residential component that a program gets through DCF. As far as program administration, we look at the governing body, the administrator's credentials, their organization chart, their job descriptions, and their assignment and their responsibilities. For providers of instructional services, we look at the lists and certification of all instructional staff, and I am going to scroll so that you can so this is the general information. This is a blank fillable PDF. So programs can go right in and fill in their information, save it, and then send it off. We like to get these applications at least a week prior to our site visit day 1, but in the application, it does outline that we should have it 2 weeks prior. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. We're always trying to coordinate pick up and drop off of application because, as I'm sure you can tell, sending this in the mail could be cumbersome. So I kind of already talked about the program locations, location-specific information. This is the approvals from other oversights. We always want to know who the on-site program administrator is, because if you have multiple locations, you want to make sure that you know who the administrator is in the building. And we'll also ask how much time that individual spends in that building. Approval from other agencies, like I kind of already outlined. Program administration, job descriptions. Instructional service providers. This is where we check all the certifications of the staff lists that are provided. Related service, same thing. Sometimes a program might have third-party related service contracts, and we would look at those contracts as well, and then ensure that those individuals that are working in the program have their appropriate credentials. Any additional staff, whether it be support staff, para, we're looking to get a list of those staffing, and then if they have the appropriate credentials. Then we get to the program description of services, which, sorry, I'm kind of like jumping back and forth between 2 documents. So we want to look at their admissions packet, their admissions procedures, the criteria for admission, and the termination of enrollment. Documenting collaboration with LEAs prior to enrollment. We look to see if there was a placement PBT that was conducted with individuals from both the district and the APSEP. We look at student discipline, so policies, suspension procedures, PBIS, exclusionary timeout policies, documentation of staff training and behavior interventions, like whether a school prescribes to PMT training. We would look at the training dates and make sure that everyone is up to date with their restraint exclusion training. Any kind of agreements on behavioral supports with affiliated programs. I'm going to switch back so I can kind of scroll. This will indicate what subject areas the program works on, what curriculum is used. The programs have to submit a separate binder of their curriculum, and we would go through that and make sure it aligns with the Common Core. The effective date of IEP implementation. Statewide assessments. This is another big piece. We look to see if there's individuals that are DA trained and TEA trained to make sure that they can administer statewide assessments. We would also get a list of the students who are participating in the assessments for the year, and then asking for the name of the assessment coordinator. And then we would go to the performance office and double check that that individual is actually trained and have their certification. I already talked about student discipline, PBIS. Transportation. So this is a very big part of ABCEP approvals, we have to ensure that they have transportation procedures, that they have contracts with vendors if they don't have their own drivers. We have a list of the authorized drivers. I would then go to DMV to ensure that those individuals have active endorsements so that they can transport students. So they need to provide a list of the driver's licenses and their training records because per DMV, the individual has to be trained yearly. We would look at any safety issues, so emergency procedures, their drill records, their restraint and seclusion reporting, their smoking policies, their crisis team training, and if there's swimming supervision, sometimes programs might have access to a pool. So we would go as far as to making sure that the individual who's listed as their lifeguard has their lifeguard certification. We also look at medication administration policies and medical approval advisor signatures. We would look at the MAR, the medical administration record for individuals who receive medication while they're in school. We look at, I think I already mentioned their emergency drills, yes. And then for every student file that we review, we would also look at their restraint and seclusion record to ensure that there's 4 and 20s happening or that parents are being notified or that it's being documented in CT SEDS. We look at enrollment, their administration procedures, the criteria for acceptance. Termination, I already went over that. And I'm going to scroll again on the application so that we can get further along. General policies and procedures. We spend a lot of time looking at a program's policy to ensure it's current along with legislation that might be changing. I find that as I'm going through the application, that's the biggest piece of feedback I might give to people is if I notice there's missing something in their policy, I'll kind of recommend that they add that in to make sure it's really tight. The programs are required to notify the CSDE if there's any program changes. So this kind of just outlines that. It's an attestation that they are in fact doing that. We already went over safety issues, smoking policy, emergency drills, supervision of swimming pools, enrollment. We went over the admissions and the reason for discharge. Planning and placement decisions, we would look at the student IEP's 10 files. We review 10 student files. I apologize I know we don't have a lot of time left and I want to respect that.
That's great.
Okay. Any discharge, like I went over, discharges, student files. So yeah, this is like the MAR, cumulative health records. The ABCEPs are required to keep a record of a student while they're in the program. So we would just make sure that that student file is full and complete. Okay, so personnel matters. This has a lot to do with professional development. So we would look at their professional development record just to ensure that the individual is getting 18 hours of free professional development provided by the program. So they have to have a plan, they have to have a professional development policy, they have to have documentation of the staff training, and then any personnel policies and evaluation procedures. So that's your yearly evaluation that the staff engages in. For the fiscal management piece, we look at an audit report that is compiled by an auditors of accountant, if I'm saying that correctly. They have to be a certified auditor of accountant that prepares their audit requirements for the program, and that's submitted just so we can ensure that the program is fiscally sound and can carry out programming for the duration of the approval. We look at any insurance coverage, whether they do own vans, they have to make sure that they have their general workers' comp and insurance coverage for these mechanisms. Conflict of interest policies, if that's applicable. Insurance documentation, conflict of interest, went over that. And then As an attestation piece at the end, we ask for up to 5 letters of recommendation from district support, communications from parents that are kind of supporting the program and outline that they're doing a good job and providing the service that is expected. And then we would, of course, have the chief administrator and the ed director sign. Personnel matters. Fiscal management, went over that. Attestation. Yes. And that's as quick as I could go. And then I would divert to Sean because Sean has been through this process. Actually, I worked with Sean this year approving the Joshua Centers. Sean, do you feel like I missed anything that's really important to outline?
Sean had to step off the
Oh.
meeting because he had something else coming up, so he had to step off and
No worries.
just shared that he's very comfortable and understands this process quite well, obviously.
Yeah.
So Ashley, very much appreciated. I think it's really helpful that you did this presentation. Brian, thanks for connecting and the dots and making sure she's here with us. I definitely think this is worth a follow-up, and Rep Wheeler and I can chat, because one piece of this charge that we have, is looking at this process, right? This process to become an approved private. So you've explained the process, though quickly but thoroughly, and there's a lot to it, 41 pages. What the legislature has asked this commission to do is to review that and recommend any new methodologies, right, around approving. So that's like the next step conversation. Like once we all get on the page, like here's the process now. We'll have to talk about that at our next meeting, maybe, and maybe Mary, we can put that sort of on the top of our agenda, sort of thing, for next time, because it is a piece we are just touching now, I think, for the first time, but certainly is worthy of some conversation and follow up. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you for this. It's a great foundation for us and really needed. There's a lot. I mean, I think we'll all have a lot of reading materials this next time. I'm not sure if we want that or not, but between what Brian's going to get us on data and Ashley's stuff here, on this process would be great to review that. Again, Mary and I will kind of connect offline and come up with sort of a plan really quickly with our last 30 seconds or a minute and a half, just to kind of put some dates on the calendar. Again, I know summer's really tough and terrible, but we pick some dates. We have July 8th, and we'll get these out through Mia as well and get actual formal invites. None of these dates are going to be great for everyone just because it's summer, but we at least got Mary and I on board, and hopefully a handful of you. I'll say everyone in this room I would love to have there, because this has been a great meeting, a great conversation. So July 8th, August 19th, because we ran into the first 2 weeks of August are very vacation intensive. So hopefully August 19th works. And then September 9th was our tentative for the start of the school year in September. I know start of the school year is a whole nother situation, right? Because things are getting ramped up on that side. I know Brian and you had mentioned the back to school on the 14th or something to that effect, towards the back to school event. So, kind of joining in on that for part of this conversation might be helpful as well. So those 3 dates, sort of the 9 to 10:30, hopefully we can get. I don't think any of those dates they're midweek, they're Wednesdays, so we should be mostly okay, not hitting other crazy stuff other than people's vacation schedules. So any last parting words or comments from anyone? And seriously thank everyone here for, I know this is it's hard, these commissions and these volunteer commissions, for you guys to be part of them, and for all of us. And appreciate everyone's work in between the meetings, which sometimes it's hard to do, and really get far on this stuff, but I think we're making some progress, and appreciates everyone's input. It's good and important topics for us to be chiming in on, and sometimes I'm amazed by the group and the expertise in the room. That's super great to be working with you guys. So Mary, anything else?
No, just really appreciate the conversation today. And just to follow up, I think if we can try to get the lists from organizations for email distribution and any follow-up questions we might want to add to the survey as soon as possible. And we'll get the updated SDE email list after the July 1st turnover.
Perfect. Thank you all. And if I don't talk to you or see you, we'll see you hopefully on July, what the hell did I say? 8th, July 8th. can't even keep track. And yeah, enjoy the holiday weekend between now and then, and the end of school, which many of you are going through that whole thing. So my son's graduating this year, so this is like big year for me. My youngest is graduating. It's super awesome, and some other day I'll share with you the stories of that. He's been in school district since day one, and it's been amazing. And good story. It's one of the good stories I can share. So it's been awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's super exciting. All right. Yeah, we will see you all. Mary, I'll connect with you offline, and we'll